What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Simple Dad Podcast. I am your host, Quincy Forte, and I am joined by my illustrious producer slash co-host, Mr. Remon. What's up, Remon?
Hey, yo, what up, brother?
How's it going?
Man, it's going all right, man. It's a lot going on right now. It's kind of heavy, it's really heavy outside. You know what I mean? But maintaining, holding steady. How about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of the same here. Uh, so for those who don't understand, like I guess the time and when this podcast is being recorded, we're in the middle of a situation shortly following the George Floyd incident, to where the police officer uh, put his knee on the neck of a black man for 8 minutes and I think 43 seconds. I think was the total. And now, over recent days, the autopsy reports come back, and it said that he died of asphyxiation and loss of blood flow, which was directly caused by the officer's knee in his neck. And so, yeah, like a lot of things have been going on. We've been having peaceful protests. We've been having protests of all kind. There's been a lot of rioting and looting. So a lot of just kind of uneasiness and unrest, and all of this during a pandemic. So yeah, that's
Right. Yeah.
it feels like so much has gone on.
I mean, and that's one of the, like, when I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about the Ahmaud Arbery thing. That was one of the things. I was like, man, like we have enough to deal with, with this pandemic and the lockdown and everything. Like now we got to deal with this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, so like, I mean, part of me thinks, and like this is just like kind of a theory, that it's kind of like almost a butterfly effect. Like, so how much
Mm,
of this frustration, pent up rage would have led to this had we not been in our current situation? Like, is it the COVID thing, and then built on frustration, and then plus a lot of the stuff that goes on with officers and Black people, African Americans, however you classify, is that now coming to a point and causing us to act out, on top of the aggression, frustration, and rage of like a down economy? Like somebody talks about, actually, we're going through three things, because you look at the pandemic, you look at unemployment because of the pandemic, and then you look at like
hmm
the race relations. So I kind of like, it's like,
Yeah, it's like it's created like a perfect storm for what's going on right now. Like it, I don't think the death of George Floyd would have been enough. I
yeah,
don't even think the death of Breonna Taylor would have been enough, or Ahmaud Arbery. Those things by itself wouldn't have been enough for this. Um, especially for you to see it across the country like that. Maybe in Minneapolis we would have saw it, but across the country, it's like, what are people in San Francisco angry about? What's going on in, what I'm saying, Minnesota for, right? So I think it's a combination of things, like all those things you listed. It's the pandemic, it's the lockdown, it's the um, people not being able to live their lives the way they want to. It's the unemployment. People are, unsure about the future. What's going to happen with their jobs. The unemployment rate is through the roof. You know what I mean? And then on top of all of that, you got, you know what I mean, like racial tension that
mm-hmm,
that existed even before Corona, even before the lockdown. You know what I mean? Even before quarantine, that never really got resolved. So And then it's just a bunch of angry, like a bunch of people that's angry with, the government, the current administration. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? That existed before the quarantine, that existed before the pandemic. So I think all of this stuff just kind of created a perfect storm. It created a powder keg that was, destined to explode at some point.
You mean the current administration uh, who uh, was completely against people speaking their mind on Twitter and saying, "Hey, we need to that's what do you call it? Defamism of character. We need to, or defamation of
Or
character. We need to
defamation.
stop that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to stop that. We need to shut them down on Twitter from saying slanderous things." But when he says something on Twitter and Jack Dorsey and crew actually take action and they say, "Yo, you can't say that. You can't threaten that we're going to shoot people who are rioting and looting." So they removed his tweet, and now he's like, "Hey, you got to stop censoring people's speech. Like you can't do that." And so now he's trying to appeal Twitter and say, "Hey, y'all can't cancel people's right to speak." And I'm like, "Well, which one is it? Like we
Yeah.
have to have either a freedom of speech, so where we can say anything within our rights, even about you." Um, or we have to have some sort of censoring. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, but that's kind of been the the a pattern, should I say, with him since he's taken office. Is he's coming and going at all times.
Or hey, I didn't say that.
Right. Yeah,
you
yeah.
clear
Or
you
in complete denial. Like I never said that. What do you mean?
you
like
clearly told people to drink bleach on TV, and then you're like, I didn't say that. That's not what I said.
Yeah. And then also, man, I want to make sure I point out, because I posted this on Facebook, but I want to make sure I point it out here as well, that a lot of the rioting that you're seeing is not the protesters. It's people, it's plants that they put in, and this is a tactic that the police used during Ferguson and during Baltimore. After Mike Brown and Freddie Gray. They plant people amongst the protesters, to incite riots. You know what I mean? And there's a bunch of videos of just random people who, and we understand that, there's more people than just black people that are out there protesting. But these are like white people who are going around spraying Black Lives Matter on walls and businesses and smashing out windows and stuff. And um, you know, obviously there are going to be those, white people who are going to participate in the protest, but these is like just random because they're not actually marching with the people. They're just there
Hmm.
randomly. You know what I mean? So I want to, and I want to make sure I point that out because, a lot of this stuff is going to get blamed on the protesters. And, I think that's a complete miscarriage of justice. Like, it shouldn't happen. So I definitely want to urge everybody that's out there protesting to be aware and be mindful of that because you don't want to, you know, you have to weed those people out. You know what I mean? However you can.
Well, and also to add to that, to not have your own sense of judgment. Like, don't be
Mm-hmm.
easily swayed by uh, the waves of a crowd. I mean, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
like it's just your own character, right? So if you see
Right.
that thing, I mean, it kind of goes out. I mean, at the same time of the police officers holding each other accountable. It's like we as people to make sure that it's done right and that the messaging and that the
Mm-hmm.
solution is carried out in the right way. We
Mm-hmm.
have to hold each other accountable too. So if you see something and you're like, "Yo, what are you doing? That's random. That doesn't even have anything to do with what we're trying to accomplish." Like you have
Yeah.
to,
Like, go ahead.
I was gonna say you have to kind of not combat that, but you have to call it out. Like, don't just be like, "Yeah, all right, cool. You just did that. It was random, but I don't have an opinion. I'm just gonna keep doing this thing."
Yeah, nah, it's you know, it's definitely been videos of people like putting a stop to it. Um like I saw there was this one video where, you know, there was like a group of, I don't know what the races were in the car, but they like, this one black girl had stopped them because they had handed a brick out the window to, you know, a black guy who was out there protesting. And like she had stopped him and went to the car window, handed him back the brick. It was like, look, like what are you doing out here? Like why are you just going around handing bricks to random black people?
And
You know what I
instigating.
mean? Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and I get it because you know, people are angry, people are frustrated, and you know, stuff like that when they see um, you know, it incites riots. You know what I'm saying? When
Mm-hmm.
they see one person doing it, you know, it's kind of like a domino effect. It's like, you know, so you know, I get it, but at the same time, I agree. You know what I'm saying? People need to practice their own judgment, you know, their best judgment while they out there, and making sure that you know, to keep their composure at all times.
Yeah. And I think that so um, I think that kind of leads into our topic today. And we wanted to kind of acknowledge, definitely for sure, you know, the current state of things, but we also wanted to find a way to link it into our topic. And I think it's perfectly relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier this week, I sent you a little bit of a snippet from a book that I'm reading called, or I just finished actually for the second time, called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And a little
Very popular
background,
book.
yeah, and like just a little background. It was written during like shortly after cataloging the times of the Great Depression. So a lot of things that you're seeing now with the downturn in the economy, um,
It's a lot of parallel.
a lot of parallels for sure. And then just people are just kind of uncertain. It's kind of like a guidebook through these times. And the first half of the book is kind of setting up the story. The middle half is personal assessment. And then the last half is sort of a mental assessment and kind of things to that you can control and to shape as far as your mind, your mental state. There's a chapter on the brain. There's a chapter on fear, and then it goes on to talk about how to outwit the six ghosts of fear. Um, and so one of those ghosts of fear is criticism. And so I found this extremely important. And so I'll read the beginning statement and then I'll read the six symptoms of fear. And we can talk about it a little bit. So the beginning statement says, the fear of criticism robs man of his initiative, destroys his power of imagination, limits his individuality, and takes his self-reliance and does him damage in 100 other ways. And it says criticism will plant fear in the human heart or resentment, but it will not build love or affection. And so, out of that, the symptoms of fear criticism are self consciousness, nervousness and being timid in conversation, meeting strangers, awkward movements, lack of poise, that's a shaky voice, and lack of confidence in yourself. Your personality, you have the inability to have firmness in your decision or charm, um, or express opinions definitively as extensions of yourself. Inferiority complex, the habit of expressing self approval by word of mouth, by actions, as a meaning of covering up feeling of inferiority, use big words to impress people, extravagance. And this is the keeping up with the Joneses complex. You spend time, you're spending money way beyond your means. Um, Lack of initiative, and that's just your failure to embrace opportunities and self advancement, fear to express opinions, lack of confidence in your own ideas, and then lack of ambition, just mental and physical laziness. You don't self assert yourself in decisions. You're easily influenced by others. Um, so I found that in kind of reading through these, like I obviously picked out certain character flaws in myself, and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of related it back to, um, our upbringing and stuff like that, and even how I talk to or we talk to our kids, right? As far as um, being overcritical, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to shape every movement, or you walk like this, stand like this, cut your hair like this, do like this,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of makes you like all of these make sense, right? Because it kind of makes you gun shy in a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and like making decisions and stuff like that. You need other people to do those types of things for you, and I
Mm-hmm.
see that in society now. I see that especially with what's going on. So, what are your thoughts, kind of, on this whole idea?
Right. So, and I want to kind of touch on it because I mentioned this when you mentioned the list to me earlier, like the extravagance thing. That's
Hmm.
not one that I recognize within myself. Like, I've always been pretty like, um, you know, low key about the way I spend my money and, trying not to live outside of my means. But, um, I definitely recognize that within our culture, right? Um, you got a lot of people who, they'll be living in the hood, living in the projects, driving the Benz,
Hmm.
right? Um, you got, the way, a lot of guys, they wear all this big gaudy jewelry and they got the gold teeth, they got the big gold chains and all of this stuff. And, it's more of a, like, hey, see me, look at me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm constantly being overlooked and constantly being overlooked by society and cult and people. And, so now I have this money. I want you to see me. I want to wear my wealth, right? Um, so I definitely recognize that within our culture that, this idea of we have to have the most expensive everything and the most uh, opulent everything and the most gaudy everything, you know what I mean? Like, and whereas, maybe in some other cultures who haven't experienced some of the oppression that we've experienced and haven't experienced some of the situations that we in our culture have experienced, they don't have that need to be seen like that. You know what I mean? Like when you look at a lot of millionaires from other cultures, they don't wear their wealth. Like
Yeah.
they'll walk right by you on the street and you'll never know that the billionaire just walked by you.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Uh,
So
and I was gonna say, so a lot of where I see these kind of, and especially me, the artist side of me, the content producer side of me, is I'll have really good ideas. And you see
mm,
this with a lot of people, but you have the sort of analysis paralysis, right? So you kind of think about it and you're like, well, if I put this out, will it be funny?
you
Who's gonna,
overthink it.
yeah, who's gonna laugh at it? And then by
Mm-hmm.
the time you've talked yourself in a whirlwind, you're like, well, you know what? I'm just not gonna post it. I spent like 6 hours thinking about posting it, and I'm not gonna post it.
Yeah, or even you know, sometimes where it's like you like on social media and stuff like that, like you'll get ready to post something and uh you like you sit there and you like you done type the post out. All you got to do is press send at that point, and you just like, oh, I'm gonna delete it, forget it.
Yeah, and it's simply because, I mean, I think social media has kind of magnified this like criticism piece, right? Because everybody is so critical on the internet, like YouTube, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So even us getting this podcast launched, like this simple dad idea has been it started off as a book idea, and then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, it'd be awesome if we can do content.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of took the sort of leveling of everybody's media. And we've talked about this in a previous episode, to be like, oh, well, now that I'm looking at them and they're on Zoom, Lil Wayne's
Mm-hmm.
on Zoom, Kevin Hart's on
Mm-hmm.
Zoom. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I could be on Zoom and do this like that. I mean, I don't have to have
Right,
a studio and like
right.
now. But then you look at it at a deeper level, it's because I didn't want to like put out something because I don't have what these people have as far as money and resources and stuff like that. And instead of just doing it, I was thinking about the critical piece of it to be people would be like, oh, that's bootleg. Like I'm not gonna watch that, blah blah blah, because of this. Um, and so I definitely think that maybe not directly necessarily tied and stemmed from exactly how we were raised and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But just think, I think that the fear of criticism can evolve into kind of these six um, the few symptoms of fear of criticism, and that they can kind of um, amplify
Hmm.
um, based on how you're able to address them.
Hmm.
And so I don't think I started out with a fear of like, what will people think? Because I think, I mean, even as kids, like, um, if you think of like, so obviously we have a 6 year old now, and she's 5 months old today, a 5 month old. So the 6 year old is at a completely different space, right? So where he's starting to recognize criticism. And so we have to be cautious as to how hypercritical we are of him. And so a lot of times um, he may have some artistic expression that he wants to do, and he wants, like, we're trying to do art and he wants it to be like this, but we're like, hey, that's not what the video is doing. You have to do, kind of, and make it the same. And he's like, well, I want to do it like this. um, and sometimes we're like, if you want it to look right, you got to do it like the video. We're kind of pigeonholing him into fitting in, and he's like, no, I just kind of want it to look like this, and I'm fine with it looking like this. um, and I think it's going to be like, if we obviously don't address it or sort of give him some freedoms, it's going to turn into that criticism thing.
Hmm.
Whereas the 5 month old, she don't care. Like, we don't criticize her. We don't say, hey,
Right.
you're not holding your neck up straight enough, like, we just let you lean over. And like, or the drooling, we're like, oh, you just drooled on me. Like, we're not like,
Uh,
hey, stop drooling or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And so I think it's kind of a certain age to where, and you sent me that thing about how um, it's not necessarily our job to sort of dictate everything, but to guide. And I think that was also a philosophy that I got from Will Smith, is that, I mean, we gave birth to you, or she gave birth to you. I didn't do anything. um, but it's our mission here to, like, guide you, and be sort of like this whole idea of the sensei. Like, it's like we're Master Splinter. We're supposed to tell you, hey, you can do that, but
mm,
it might not turn out like you want. But like, as far as sort of whipping you into shape and conformity. I don't know. I just have a different view on that, I guess.
yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of cases, because we was talking earlier in the week about how, a lot of the things that we deal with as, adults, they're rooted from things that we dealt with as kids, you know what I mean? Things that we experienced as children.
Yeah.
And, um, it's almost like, you know, if you spend too much time criticizing a child, at that young age, you know what I'm saying, you start to see like the fruit of it as they get older. You know what I mean? So I definitely think it's, you kind of have to give kids the freedom to kind of make like you do make up their own mind and make up their own decisions, and like kind of give them the cause and effect, the like your actions have consequences, that type of thing. So like you can do that, but are you prepared to deal with the consequences of
Well, I mean, you can even look at, like, so Michael Jordan's whole career. If we look at another MJ, Michael Jackson, like, a lot of their success was directly attributed to wanting approval, obviously from their father, right? And that's
it?
who was the heaviest critic on them. And like a lot of Mike growing up, Michael, the Moonwalker Michael, he uh, didn't have the ability, like he missed the childhood and the growth development process. So he didn't have the ability a lot of times to make decisions. And so there were people around sort of made decisions for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then Michael Jordan, like you saw that his drive was, father's approval. And I just was looking at a documentary, the 30 for 30 on Junior Seau.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of his success was the criticism thing from his father. Like no matter how well he did, his father would always point out something and say, "Hey, you didn't do good enough." And so
Mm-hmm.
Junior Seau said that his father meant well and he was trying to make him better. But then you can see how the ways that it like deteriorated his life over time, to the sense that and then there was one point or one story to where Junior Seau, like his team, like they lost the championship. And like it may have been because the quarterback threw an
Mm-hmm.
interception, but when Junior got home, or like when they lost the Super Bowl, even as a grown man, Junior's making millions of dollars, right? But when he got home, his dad was like, "Yo, you disgraced the family. You didn't do enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you would have done more, y'all would have
Mm-hmm.
won the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter what the offense did. If the offense played like crap or somebody got hurt, he's like, you didn't do enough."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so just that like weighing on people, man, that's intense. And so I look at examples like that, and I'm just like, I don't want necessarily for my expectations um, to weigh that heavy on our kids, but at the same time, I don't want to look at it through the lens of that's a little me, right? Because then I start looking at the things that the downfalls that I see in myself. And I'm trying to pull those out of him where he may not or she may not have those pitfalls yet. And so I'm like
Mm-hmm.
creating these pitfalls in them and being like, hey, I don't want you to do this that I did. And they might even
Right.
have that.
They might not have it yet, and it might never develop in them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But a lot of times, parents project uh their own experiences on their children. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And that's damaging in a lot of ways. And I think one of the, like you mentioned, Junior Seau. I think another example of that, another documentary is the Aaron Hernandez
Mm,
documentary, where
yeah.
you saw like one of the most extreme, you know, scenarios of that. And, being criticized, especially because a lot of times, especially young boys, they look to their father for approval. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like they look to you like, am I doing this right? Like, is this okay? You know what I mean? More so than they look to their mother. And when they don't get that from their father, you know what I mean? I think it creates a cycle of fear of rejection and fear of disappointment. Disappointing the people who you care about. So, um, I think honestly, I think the approach that you guys are taking is the best approach.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of definitely a balance too, because I don't want to necessarily be like too loose as
Exactly.
far as
Exactly.
that goes, because I don't want to raise some little wild stallions. But at
Hmm.
the same time, I want them to be that sort of innovative, um, outside the box thinker, and not be necessarily confined. Like you think of, like I was just talking to, and these are conversations that I would say that our parents never had with us, and thinking about innovative and creative, right? So like for us, it was, hey, this is the formula that successful business is the way to go. Like, don't think anything outside of business. Um, Andrew wants to be a scientist. And I'm like, yo, that's awesome. Like, scientists do a lot of cool things. I was on a scientist podcast. Like, you can do really cool things. And then I also recognized yesterday that he has really big ideas, but that he doesn't know um, how to put them into action. And so I compared him. I was like, hey, you know what? This iPhone that we got, Steve Jobs, a lot of ideas. Read his biography. Steve Jobs can't build a phone. He knows how to find the people to build a phone, and say,
Hmm.
hey, and he knows when when the end result is fitting his vision. And so he's like,
Mm-hmm.
yo, no, that ain't it. He's like, y'all got to go back to the drawing board. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I got the capital, I got the ideas, I know how to make people work together. He's like, but I can't
Mm-hmm.
build it. And so like just having that conversation and knowing uh, that he doesn't necessarily have to be the worker. He can be the idea guy. And there were a lot of people that were the idea guys, but then also telling him, hey, you have to understand how to get people to work together. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a different skill set um, that I wouldn't say that we were taught that, but we kind of discovered through exposure and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was having a conversation with one of my partners, man. He has a, he's a, he admitted to me that he's kind of like he's an entrepreneur, and he's done a lot of businesses. But one thing that he's admitted to me that is that he struggles in the sense of uh, promotion and marketing, and he just kind of likes to run the business, structure, and run the day-to-day operations. But when it comes to like actually promoting it and marketing, it's like I'm not good at that. And but one of the things that I pointed out is like, yeah, but your partner is. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like, so it's like you don't have to be good at everything. You know what I mean? Like you have your lane. Everybody has their lane. Like I do this good, you do that good. If we put what we're doing together, then we can make what we're working on a whole lot bigger. And you know, planting those seeds in children, I think is the best idea because it gives them the mentality like, yo, like I don't have to be great at everything. I just have to be really good at one thing. You know what I mean?
mm,
And if I'm really good at one thing, then I can prosper in this lane. Like when you in your lane, you look like a rock star. The second you step out of your lane, you kind of look like a fool.
case in point, Dennis Rodman.
Mm.
Dennis Rodman, probably the least amount of points scored for a
Right.
basketball player. But like
Hmm.
rebound wise, defense,
Rebound.
steals,
Yes. Yes.
getting boards, he was like,
Hmm.
that's my role. That's what I
Hmm.
do. I go in, I play hard, I play
Hmm.
fast, I get rebounds. Like that's it. I'm the
Hmm.
rebound guy. Everybody
Right.
knows my role. They don't expect me to
Right.
come out and score 20 points a game, have
Right.
10 assists.
Right.
They know that I might have 15 rebounds, and those
Right.
rebounds, offensive or defensive, can change the course of a game. So I know my
Hmm.
role. So
Yeah. I mean, like again, like everybody can't be, Michael. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you got to play the Scottie Pippen role. Sometimes you got to play the Dennis Rodman or Horace Grant. But at the end of the season, if everybody does their job, everybody got a ring.
today, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everybody wants to be Michael.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and
uh,
even like one of the things that I noticed, like one of the reasons why I think the music industry is suffering, especially like when you look at like record labels, because even the people who are supposed to be like developing the artist and being the AR, like the AR wants to be the star now. Like
mm,
like you're the AR, like what are you doing on the red carpet? You know what I'm saying? Like why are you doing interviews on podcasts? Like you're an AR. You're supposed to be behind the scenes. You're supposed to be the invisible hand. You know what I mean? So you got what you have is a lot of people that's stepping out of their lane, and I think kind of everybody kind of suffers for
that exposes you too, right? But then it
it.
goes back to like kind of the the symptoms of the fear of criticism, right? Because like now, and also it more deeply ties into another book that I'm reading where it talks about like ego. It's Ryan Holiday's ego is the enemy,
Hmm.
right? And so now you feel that you're going to get criticized because you're not doing, and people can't see what you're doing. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
when your ego kicks in. And you're like,
Hmm.
hey, I have to point all the arrows at me to show, hey,
Hmm.
32 seconds in the video, I'm the one who wrote this, told him to say that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I like, and then at 38 seconds, that was another word that I chimed in. And so you're like you said, they're doing these interviews and they're highlighting the things that they want to be known for and have recognition because they need that recognition.
And I definitely at some points I definitely experienced that. I think we all do at some point. You know what I mean? Because this culture that we live in today tells you that if I can't see what you're doing, then you're not doing anything.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, uh, like, and you see that on social media. Like, I remember at one point when we started rocking with the Urban Advocate is, I used to post online like, yo, these are our top 5, countries that visited the website today. You know what I'm saying? It's China, it's New York. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I used to post all of that stuff. And then at some point it got to a point where I was like, dude, I'm not like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I feel the need to announce these things to people? You know what I mean? Like, it should be enough that I know that I have visitors in other countries. It should be enough that, we have people who are, well known that are reaching out to, us and, giving us props on what we're doing. So that should be enough. Like, I don't need to perform for people. You know what I mean? So sometimes I know I have to check myself, even with some of the things that I do on social media as like, yo, am I really doing this for myself or am I performing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
No, it's crazy. And like, I can't wait to finish that book and kind of give my assessment of like ego being an enemy. Like, that's another great sort of text that I think that we should walk through because it talks about child development, and he even addresses how it's not like his philosophy isn't as closely tied to psychologists, and you think of Sigmund Freud and like ego and
mm,
everything stemming from childhood, but he kind of
mm,
talks about um, checkpoints and progressions that you go through in life, and how it can um, certain certain accomplishments, if unchecked, and if you're not consciously like looking within, can spiral out of control, and then you lose senses of like ego
mm.
and self and stuff like that. And so, no, it's a really good thing that we should talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there's levels to it at all times. There's a healthy amount of ego that I think everybody should have, right? But then
Yep.
it starts to get to a point where it starts to become a hindrance, and it starts to become more toxic and damaging than anything else. So uh, I think that I can't wait for us to have that conversation.
Cool. All right. So, little man is stirring. So I'm going to say that is the end of the podcast. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Um, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. Obviously, below, Remon does a good job of putting that stuff in all the things that I'm bad at. We talked about partnerships. The
Mm,
producer, my brother, does all the things. So,
putting it
um,
together.
yeah. All right, but yeah, with that, it's been another episode of the Simple Dad podcast. Your host, Quincy Forte, joined by my producer Remon. And by the way, again, we don't do this enough. Remon, what's your social? Again.
You can hit me up at Urban Advocate on Instagram, at the Urban Advocate on YouTube and Facebook. You can hit me up if you have any questions about where to follow me. Just go to theurbanadvocate.com. All the information is there.
Yeah, for sure. And you can find me at Quincy Forte across all platforms. And I think that we have at the Simple Dad Pod across all platforms. So if you search that, YouTube, we don't have our custom link yet, but we're waiting on that. So, and yeah, we're going to start rolling out more content. So we've been kind of waiting and putting a bunch of stuff in the arsenal. So if you made it to this point of the video, all the stuff's going to start rolling out. So you should see it. So, yep. Again, y'all have a good week. And
Peace.
peace out.